Poverty and human rights. The persistence of extreme income poverty and social inequality throughout the world is a fundamental cause of global injustice and deprivation. Despite making important strides during the last decade in reducing overall world poverty, more than 1 billion people still live on less than $1.25 a day. Poverty and human rights are interlinked with each other. While most governments have ratified core international human rights treaties, this does not translate into actual practices on the ground. In many situations, economic and class disparities are exacerbated through discriminatory laws and policies that violate basic rights, such as those to freedom of movement, access to healthcare and education, expression and association. Poverty and human rights to life. Economic poverty is an order in which a person lacks the monetary conditions necessary to acquire necessities sufficient for their well-being or even survival with dignity. The most extreme example of economic poverty is starvation, while other forms include lack of shelter, clothing and hygiene. Human rights are conceptualized as common-sense ideas that are basic to the dignity and worth of each individual. In a globalizing world, extreme poverty is not only a widespread phenomenon but also one of profound social and cultural significance. Poverty is the lack of basic human needs, including clean water, food and sanitation. The human right to life is one of the most basic biological rights we have as humans. It's a mistake to think that you don't live with poverty or that it doesn't affect you, whether you are aware of it or not. Poverty and human rights to equal treatment. People in poverty need to be treated with respect, and general resources need to be allocated to ensure the entire population can live at an acceptable level. The paper studies the concepts of poverty, the global causes of absolute deprivation, the human right to equal treatment. The Global Human Rights Framework provides a vision and an effective means of combating inequality and human rights abuse. Poverty is the absolute lack of basic human needs due to financial, social and political reasons. The United Nations Convention on the Reduction of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women defines gender inequality as women and girls being deprived of access to opportunities and resources like education, healthcare, and employment. Poverty exists in many places around the world, however it is mostly seen in developing countries. According to UNICEF data, about 1 billion people live in poverty, which accounts for about 1/6 of the world's population. Poverty and human rights to privacy. Whether we like it or not, the current economic climate has seen a rise in poverty levels. There are thousands of people that have to survive in food banks and at risk of evictions because they don't have enough money to live on. Poverty is also an indicator that certain rights of people are not secured. Issues such as violence, human trafficking, prostitution and child labor are closely linked to poverty. Therefore, poverty can be seen as a human rights violation. The human right to privacy is an essential part of a poverty reduction strategy. Privacy is key to people's ability to move out of poverty and make choices about their lives. Poverty and human rights to marry and have family. Poor is a special characteristic of human beings' common aspects, which has its origin from nature, and human has the citizen's obligation and human right to have a family by marriage marital union. The world has enough wealth to abolish poverty, but 8 million children die from poverty every year. The human right to marry and have family is the basic demand of marriage equality, and it is denied for same-sex couples in most parts of the world. With a global human right to marry and have family, the lives of all children will be improved. Poverty and human rights to freedom. Some of the world's poorest people live in extreme poverty. Worldwide, more than 1 billion people lack access to the basics needed for human survival. They could not be more different from you and me in wealth, health, education and opportunities. Yet they are equal with every person on this earth in their right to freedom and equality. In today's world we witness highly increasing number of people around the globe being trapped in modern-day slavery. These are individuals deprived of their freedom, sold and bought as property, forced to do degrading jobs, and living in deplorable conditions. The nature of modern-day slavery is hidden from public view as well as from law enforcement officials, given that there is no universally agreed definition of what is considered modern-day slavery. Consequently, it is a recurring problem that is not thoroughly addressed. Poverty and human rights. Poverty and human rights to asylum. Today, states are responsible for the treatment of asylum seekers who enter their territories without authorization. This responsibility is recognized in Article 14 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Article 3 of the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees, the Refugee Convention. It is also reflected more specifically in Article 22(1) of the Refugee Convention, which provides that The contracting states shall not impose penalties, on account of their illegal entry or presence, on refugees who, coming directly from a territory where their life or freedom was threatened in the sense of Article 1, enter or are present in their territory without authorization. Despite its legal obligations under international law not to impose penalties on asylum seekers for entering or being present in its territory without authorization, many EU member states' domestic legislation, including Greece, establishes a criminal offence constituting an administrative shortcoming punishable by fines and/or a prison term. Poverty and human rights to work. Poverty is a multifaceted concept involving a certain set of conditions defined by social, economic and political parameters. About 1.2 billion people in the world, i.e. 1 in 8 are living with less than $1.25 per day, at 2005 prices, 80% of whom are women. On current trends, the rate of poverty reduction will be insufficient to meet internationally agreed development goals, particularly the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs. The question thus arises as to how this situation can be reversed. The International Labour Organization's answer is that by extending decent work opportunities for all, poverty can be eradicated and global sustainable development goals achieved over time. Poverty and human rights to education. Poverty and human right to education. 1 in 5 children between the ages of 7 to 16 are globally out of school. This is an alarming number given that these are the future doctors, civil engineers, accountants, and educators of the world. Education is one of the best tools available to escape poverty. We strongly believe that every child deserves a basic education. In 2006 we established the Free the Children charity in order to raise funds to build schools and educate children in extreme poverty overseas through Free the Children School for All movement.